Going on walks at night was always a relaxing, cathartic, and peaceful experience for me. Everything from the sounds of the crickets to the chills of the cool night wind helped me cure the stressful days I often went through. I'm a warehouse employee for a steel mill, and working around metal in hot furnaces wasn't exactly the most relaxing job out there. I'd come home all 5 days a week, dripping in perspiration with the smell of smoke and metallic substances engulfing me as if they were flames around a burning log. Therefore, these nightly walks were sort of a cure to all that. It was a way to improve my quality of life. I don't know what I'd do without them. But on this night though, something had felt off. Things were quieter than usual. I live in a pretty decent neighborhood. It was no gated community or anything, but I felt generally safe in the area. There wasn't much crime. In the rare times there was, though, it was usually simple break-ins or theft. No murder, drug cartels, or child molesters. Despite all of that, I had my guard up tonight. I even picked up a girthy stick I had found laying next to the sidewalk, just in case. Step by step, I marched down the streets, the wind howling as I guided myself through the dimly lit area. One car ended up driving by me. It was a smaller red sedan with a few scratches on the side. I didn't quite get a good look at the driver because of all the light reflection, but something about the car felt eerie as it passed by, like it just came out of nowhere. Huh? I huffed to myself as I gripped my arbitrary melee weapon. When I set my sights upon the area behind me, only the thick darkness of the night stared back. I could make out the figure of an owl perched on a tall-looking pine tree, but it wasn't moving or hooting. It stood as still as a block of cement, almost as if it was watching me. I couldn't make out any specific features of the owl, just the general silhouette of the creature as it stared down like I was a prey item. Now, this wasn't the scariest thing in the world, but it was slightly unsettling. I involuntarily gripped my stick a little bit more forcefully as I returned the owl's stomach-churning gaze. The critter didn't move in the slightest, even as I stared back. It was still appearing as if it were taxidermied. The fact that it didn't even flinch made it seem even more strange. Sinister, if you will. But eventually, I came to the conclusion that I couldn't stare at the thing forever and simply turned around to keep walking. I wasn't gonna let my night be ruined by just one little out-of-place event. Even though I had moved on, the encounter still sat in the back of my mind as I pressed on. I just thought it would make some good material for a joke at work tomorrow. My co-workers were pretty big fans of comedic relief during the busy hours, especially when they're constantly on high alert to prevent getting chopped up by the huge mechanical blades or getting melted by liquid scrap metal. After pressing on through the roads for a few more minutes, I had arrived at the neighborhood park. The age of the structures was becoming pretty obvious as the years came and went. The supports of the swing sets were rusting, the wood chips were more scattered than twigs in a forest, and the slides appeared as if they were going to turn you into a human Connect 4 board with all of the pieces of sharp plastic sticking out prominently like small mountains. I had come to this park often as a child. I even felt a wave of nostalgia rush over me the closer to the park I got. It was like taking a trip down memory lane. As I made my way past the basketball court and towards the opposite end of the park, I could hear an unfamiliar voice call out my name. Karl? I stopped dead in my tracks as my eyes went wide like whirlpools. The voice in question was that of a boy, a young boy. Just from the sound alone, I could predict he was no more than 10 years old. I didn't have a family or any young children in my life that I knew of, not ones that knew my name anyway. Hello? I called back into the night, still spotting absolutely nothing or no one around me. I see you, Karl. The young and unseen boy called again. His tone became more forceful. It was at this point I had felt my adrenaline begin to kick in. Everything around me began to slow down while the opposite happened to my mind and instincts. My alertness shot up like an express elevator as I felt my hands slowly shift into fists. It seemed like a bit much for what I thought was a little boy. But when you feel threatened, your instincts don't discriminate, "Shouldn't you be at home, kid?" I called out once again with no response or change in scenery. I kept still and stood my ground, looking past bushes, trees, and the cars parked in driveways for where this boy could be. "Joke's over. It's past your bedtime," I pronounced, beginning to become frustrated. But I knew in the back of my mind it was probably useless. "Don't be a meanie, Karl," Mystery Boy replied. It was like I could feel the hatred radiating from him, like he was a cooling tower in a power plant. Yet, I still didn't have a clue what he looked like. "I'm serious. Knock it off," I shouted, making sure to put some rasp into my voice. The sudden sounds of footsteps clashing against the sidewalk behind me made me jump like a frightened deer. I frantically looked around with my fists up in a boxer stance as the sound came closer and closer. It activated the deepest of primal fear and anxiety within me. The footsteps were small. They sounded like something that could come from a small boy. But yet, I felt like I was being hunted by a predator. If the kid was trying to scare me, then he was doing his job too damn well. The footsteps weren't followed up by any sort of contact, and the boy still had yet to reveal himself. But that didn't comfort me in the least. Laugh at me all you want, but I was honestly glad that the kid hadn't shown himself.
"We see you, Karl,"
came multiple voices this time. And simultaneously, they all had an echoing reverberation to them. It sounded as if they were underwater with some sort of sonar devices hooked up to their windpipes. The voices all surrounded me, a mix of men, women, and children. It almost sounded as if they were all happy, but not in a wholesome manner. It was a sinister and evil kind of happy, something that a not-so-nice kind of creature would use to lure children into a trap. But what I saw when I looked around, nothing will ever make me forget that. I peered my eyes to all of the houses in the area. I could see silhouettes in the windows. It was all men, women, and children. I couldn't make out any details of their features or bodies. They were all pitch black, with the exception of two red glowing dots coming from the area that was supposed to be their eyes. They all didn't move, not even a muscle. Their gazes all focused on me while I stood there helplessly like a wounded gazelle surrounded by hungry lions. I could feel my hands shaking uncontrollably as sweat soaked my pores. My teeth grinded together as I involuntarily clenched my jaw.
"This is not your hour, Karl,"
said a much deeper male voice with enough bass to shake the foundation of a mansion. It was raspy and did not sound humanly possible for even the most masculine of men to have. But right after that voice had spoken, I had suddenly awoken laying on the playground stairs in the park. The passing of time had seemed instantaneous, like I had only blinked instead of slept. "What the hell?" I huffed groggily, lifting myself up before pulling out my phone to check the time. 9:34 a.m. Had I gotten drunk the previous night or taken something? I did everything in my power to rationalize what had happened, but no answer seemed correct. I felt as if I had been transported to an entirely different dimension. The usual sounds of people going through their normal daily routine was beyond comforting and cathartic after the horror of whatever had happened last night. I really wanted to play it off as just some bad and alcohol-influenced dream, but the logical side of me had no mercy on my psyche. I knew deep down what I experienced was real. Not only was it real, but I had a feeling that it wasn't going to be a one-time thing. The worst part was my mind racing on the way back home. The fact that I had to deal with this alone hit me like a speeding semi-truck on the highway. It wasn't like I could tell anybody. It would be nothing but laughter and mocking before I was thrown into a mental hospital and labeled as just another unreliable crazy person who was in desperate need for recognition. Everything seemed fine in the morning. People walking their dogs, going to work, and bringing home breakfast items from whatever fast food place they had chosen to go. When I had arrived back home though, that was when I began to feel slightly on edge again. It should have been the opposite, but I felt myself unnecessarily tense up as I unlocked and opened my front door. The creak of the door followed by the eerie silence of the living room was nothing short of unsettling. I stepped inside nonetheless, little by little trying to settle back into my humble abode. As I kicked my shoes off, sat down on the couch and switched the TV on in order to try and enjoy my Saturday. But it unfortunately turned out to be the biggest mistake of my life. When the TV came on, there was nothing but a static feedback, despite the fact all the settings and cables were as normal as possible. Nothing was out of the ordinary from what I could see. I even went out of my way to check everything twice. Yet, I failed to find anything that could cause this. "Gotta be kidding me," I growled frustratedly. As I was endlessly searching the back of the TV for the potential cause of the problem, a different noise had begun to erupt from the speakers. It was ambient, low and soft music, but something about the tunes felt off. They were almost too deliberate and calm. Soothing wasn't exactly the feeling I would describe when the music played. I took a few small and slow steps back to observe what was happening on the screen, which was an even more unfortunate mistake. What I saw horrified me beyond description. I knew in that very moment I would never be the same afterwards. The footage on the screen depicted the room of an old-looking house. I could tell no one had bothered to clean or take care of it in years. The floorboards were beat up, the ceiling was cracked and covered with mold, and the walls had appeared as if the paint was trying to forcefully rip itself away. I could see one of the rusted-looking windows in the background, confirming that the video was being filmed at night. What, or whoever was holding the camera, seemed to be standing at the bottom of the staircase. I could hear their heavy breathing as they held the camera shakily. The terror I was feeling was laughably minuscule compared to their dread. But there was nothing funny about this. The camera quickly darted down to the floor and then back up to the top of the staircase, which put a near pitch black silhouette of a woman with glowing red eyes on full display standing at the top step. The mysterious and ghostly woman was simply staring down at the unlucky soul filming the video. She looked exactly like the figures I had seen last night, which sent ice-cold chills down my spine and made my hands shake with primal fear. "The night is ours," came the voice of the female silhouette. The voice itself was scratchy and almost broken sounding, like that of a long-term smoker. Yet, it was much more intimidating than any male voice I had ever heard. Her lips didn't even move as she spoke. "Please," cried a voice from behind the camera. It was much softer and pleasant, a more smooth and feminine pitch, which also gave away the fact that the person filming was a woman. Although I was suspecting the filming was not voluntary. I quickly pulled my phone out and opened up the camera app to begin recording what was happening on the TV screen. But as soon as the app opened, there was nothing but a black screen with white text that read, "Don't be a meanie, Karl." I had no choice. I had to keep watching. My morbid curiosity was peaking, and I wanted answers. It wasn't like I could pause or use the remote to tamper with the footage in any way. I even attempted to record it with my DVR to no avail. The unseen woman in the video began to plead desperately. I could hear her voice cracking as she sobbed violently in the background like a small child receiving corporal punishment. I moved my eyes towards the hallway leading underneath the staircase. Another one of those black figures appeared. Except, this time, it was the size of a small boy. He looked like what I imagined the one from last night looking like. I was sure it might have even been the same kid, or whatever that thing is. In each of his shadowy hands, he held two utensils, one being a steak knife while the opposite hand gripped a fork. They were both rusted. Multiple blades on the fork were bent incorrectly. The woman behind the camera began to cry even more desperately, crying bloody murder as the figure of the boy began to slowly levitate down the dark hallway towards her. The only indication of his movements being those two red glowing eyes slowly approaching the camera little by little through the darkness. It was like watching a bullet move towards you in slow motion. Every second of it was a breed of dread I couldn't describe, despite the fact I wasn't even the victim. Suddenly, the pair of eyes sped up supernaturally fast and were just inches from the camera. The boy's voice turned into an angry and bitter whisper before saying, "I hate you." He said with such a cold-blooded tone that I refused to believe he was ever once a normal little boy. His phrase was quickly followed by a scream of bloody murder from the woman behind the camera as blood messily splattered against the screen. Her cries of agonizing pain and indescribable terror could be heard for miles as the sound of her skin tearing like tissue paper filled the room like a high-powered stereo. It was almost as if the universe was attempting to show me mercy when the video finally cut off and the morning news had replaced it. Although it was too late at that point, I simply drowned out the sound of the news as I slumped down onto the floor with my face in my hands. I quickly began to break down like a small child. I felt as if my world was collapsing in on me like a ton of bricks. I wanted to know why. Why me? What did I do to anger these beings that would make them want to torture me? I wasn't a perfect person by any means. I've done things in my life I'm not proud of, but most people wouldn't consider me evil. I grabbed my laptop from the living room and bolted upstairs, slamming and locking the door behind me before turning on as much light as possible. If the darkness was what they needed, all I had to do was subtract it from the equation. I would soon come to learn that this was a futile effort. I began typing up my experience of what had happened so far. And that's where we are now. It's been 2 days of me being locked inside my room with no food or water. But those Nocturnals, as I call them, will kill me long before starvation does. It's nighttime outside. I took a quick glance outside my curtains and saw them surrounding the perimeter of the property. They're closing in, and I don't have much longer. To whoever finds this document, please share this. I beg of you. I need someone to get my story out there, even if you don't believe it's true. I just need to get this out there. Now that it's been another day, the little boy's voice is coming from outside my door. This is it. Whatever you do, do not look out your windows at night. Do not go outside. We do not belong in the dark. Our ancestors were right to be scared of the dark. Lock your doors. Turn on your lights. Because That was it. Those were my cousin Karl's last words. As much as everything in my mind and body told me not to, I uploaded the document. He wanted his story to get out there, and I wanted to respect his final wishes. That was the least I could do. Most people would call me a moron, but I believed his story. Every single word. Karl had always been a mentally stable person throughout his life. He drank here and there, but only in moderation. There was no reason to doubt he was telling the truth, even though it made my stomach churn. When I had gotten to Karl's house, his chair still had a dent in it from sitting down for an extended period of time. His laptop was open, but went into sleep mode. I tried to go through his TV's history and records to find the video he was talking about, but the thing had been completely fried. Not even sure how. He never mentioned that happening in the document. My mind was racing while trying to think of solutions. I wanted to find Karl. I held out false hope he might still be alive. But what could I possibly do? I wasn't equipped to deal with this supernatural stuff. For God's sake, I'm a grocery store stalker. The most insane thing I ever seen is people not being able to do simple math to calculate their change. But all that meant I needed to find someone who knows what they're doing. Someone with the skills, tools, and knowledge to help find where my cousin is, if he's still alive anyway. One Friday after I had finished work, I came home and immediately ransacked every little crevice and corner of the internet to find a paranormal investigator. It should have seemed easy, I know, but half the time it was just frauds or scammers looking to make a quick buck. My entire first night consisted of downing energy drinks and caffeine to keep myself awake while I surfed the web. That is, until I came across Ethan Velder. I read through as much as I could about the guy, his arsenal, particular areas of expertise, and past experience. From what I gathered, he seemed to be very well educated and proficient with handling demonic and otherworldly forces. Things such as evil spirits, demons, and vengeful ghosts who had decided to overstay their welcome on Earth. I wanted to be as thorough as possible to make sure I was getting my money's worth. But I put my money where my mouth was and decided to give the guy a call. "Hello? Is this Mr. Velder?" I asked.
Hey.
He replied, his voice raspy, as if he had just woken up.
I'm guessing you're calling for business purposes?
"Yeah, I need help with a problem. One that I know you can handle."
Alright.
He paused for a moment.
What little issue have you got on your hands?
The emotion in his voice was non-existent. "It's hard to explain. Is there a way I could send you something? It's a document. It should give you the info that you need."
Okie dokie. But before we get started, I need half the payment now, and the other half after the problem is taken care of. That's just my policy.
I became slightly frustrated with his dull responses. To me, it felt like he really didn't care too much about the actual problem at all. I couldn't blame him though. His job had to have been undeniably exhausting and mentally damaging. "Yeah, I guess I can do that. Do you have an email or something I can send this document to?" I continued. The rest of the call went as expected. He read off his email address, and I proceeded to send over Karl's document. He told me he would get back to me in 2 days or less, and to sit tight until then. Like that was gonna be easy. Going to work the following day was aggravating to say the least. Not only was I dealing with my uptight supervisor and arrogant customers per usual, but I was on edge about Ethan getting back to me, which only amplified the irritation I usually experienced. I tried to keep my head up to the best of my ability. "Hey Ryan, do you mind going into the back? We just got a shipment from the warehouse, and the candy aisle needs to be restocked," my supervisor asked, staring down at his clipboard, which was clearly only meant for show. Yeah, sure. Just 1 second," I replied as I finished stocking the current shelf I was working on. "Also," he turned and stopped just before walking away. "I need you to stay late tonight. It's getting close to Halloween, and we've been really busy the past week." If there were a way to describe how much I was internally sighing and complaining, I would have gone on and on. But I just kept my mouth shut for obvious reasons. I made my way to the back of the store. My supervisor wasn't lying. I could see tons of people doing last-minute shopping for Halloween candy. Some of them being small children who didn't want to wait to trick-or-treat. I opened the doors to the back and was immediately hit with a blast of cold air. It was always kept at a lower temperature to preserve the quality of things like ice cream and milk. A moderate amount of flickering accompanied me as I looked around. We had needed to get some of the ceiling lights in the back replaced for some time now, as they were constantly flickering on and off for the past few weeks at this point. I slowly walked towards the south end of the back between the tall shelves. I could see an alarming amount of rust beginning to form on the metal supports. On my way to the end, I saw a sight that froze me right in my place. I tensed up, having absolutely no idea what to do at the unsettling image in front of me. Less than 10 feet in front of me stood a man. That's what he looked like anyway. He was a disturbing pitch of black and shadowy in his appearance. I couldn't make out any facial features, save for a pair of glowing crimson dots where his eyes should have been. But his shape and general build was similar to someone I had seen before. I just couldn't put my finger on it. The figure stood in the dark corners of the back where the ceiling lights flickered the most, blending into the poorly lit area.
"You dare hunt us?"
It spoke with such force that I thought the room might have shook. The thing even sounded far more demonic than it looked. His voice reverberated and echoed, as if he had a microphone resting in his esophagus. Adrenaline flowed through my veins, but yet I stayed still. I was too stiff to move a muscle or make a sound. My mind was completely blank.
Your efforts are in vain.
The shadowy figure began to cackle in an unsettling taunt towards me. Despite there being no movement of its mouth, or any of its body for that matter. What are you? What do you want? I managed to get out, failing miserably to mask the tension in my voice. The lights began to flicker even more intensely. The room was slowly fading into darkness as I stood there in unexplainable panic. I tried to pull out my phone to record the insane events. As soon as the screen lit up, the numbers on the digital clock of my phone were constantly scrambling and changing. It looked like the slot machine of a casino. I wasn't even able to put in my passcode.
You can run and hide. We will always find you. Always.
The figure continued.
This is not your hour, Ryan.
I turned to run out of the back. I shoved my phone back into my pocket and practically launched myself through the doors to return to the main space of the store, determined to get away from that thing. I looked back through the circular window of the doors once I was on the other side. The red-eyed, shadowed man had disappeared, and the lights were no longer flickering. They were working just fine. Figures. I huffed. Are you okay? Came a female voice to my left. I turned to see my co-worker Sherry looking at me with great concern. I was in a hunched over position with my eyes as wide as possible. Her reaction to my seemingly odd behavior was justified. There were multiple seconds of awkward silence between the two of us as I decided how to respond. Yeah, just almost tripped over. I lied, not wanting to drag Sherry down into my web of confusing nonsense. Okay, right. She responded with a dry expression. Well, I was coming back here to grab some more stuff to restock the home care aisle. Didn't mean to spook you or anything. You didn't, it's okay, I replied, straightening my posture. I won't lie to you all. I had always found Sherry rather attractive. She dyed her hair a beautiful light red. Her skin was as flawless as polished marble. Her eyes sparkled like emeralds, and she always had been fun to work with. By far my favorite co-worker out of anyone. Sherry had always been much more down to earth than her appearance would lead you to believe. I had been putting off pursuing any sort of romantic relationship with her. I wasn't usually a fan of getting together with people I worked with. But lately, she has begun to change my mind. Fear of rejection had gotten in my way of ever officially doing anything other than casual flirtation. Well, I'm glad. Sherry chuckled. We've got to get our lunch soon, so if you want to come meet me in the break room, that would be great. She punctuated her sentence by flashing me a friendly smile. Before I could respond to her proposal, I felt my phone begin to vibrate aggressively in my front pocket. I took it out with a huff of hesitation. It seemed to be strangely working once again. Full display on the screen was the phone number of Ethan Velder, the paranormal investigator. Yeah, definitely. I gotta take this real quick. I'm sorry, I said as I held up a finger and slowly turned the corner, taking multiple glances around to make sure I was alone with no one around. Hello? I picked up.
Greetings, Ryan.
Ethan responded, his usual monotony being present again. Greetings? Who says greetings over the phone? You know what? Never mind. Did you find anything?
I need you to meet me tomorrow.
He responded without answering the question.
I'll send you the address.
Whoa, hold on. Did you find anything? I persisted. Ethan hung up, refusing to answer my question. I hit my fist against the wall in anger before realizing he probably had the info if he wanted to meet up in the first place. A customer had walked by at that moment and shot me a look of disappointment, as if they were my boss. The rest of work that day went by as slow as possible after that call. But the highlight was having lunch with Sherry in the break room. It helped to lighten my spirits. But that didn't mean I couldn't get the incident of what happened in the back room off my mind. You been okay? She asked after taking a bite of her vegan burger. First you were scared like crazy, now you're all spaced out. It's just been a really stressful week. Karl is still missing. I moaned, slouching back in my chair. I saw that in the news. Sherry glanced at me sympathetically. I'm really sorry. If you need a friend to talk to, I'm here. There was a pause before I spoke. I fixed my posture and sat up straight in my chair, making sure to look Sherry directly in the eyes. I appreciate it. Listen, there's something I've been meaning to... I was quickly cut off by our supervisor storming in, a neglectful expression on his face. He was in his usual authoritarian delusion, always walking around like a tough guy, despite being the shortest person in the entire staff. Sorry to interrupt, but break's over, guys. Time to get back to work. Yeah, sorry, I thought, cause everyone believes that when you use it as an excuse for the millionth time. When work had finally finished up and I went home, I stayed up all night mindlessly scrolling through Netflix as I desperately tried to get some sleep. I felt the fatigue behind my eyeballs, yet they refused to close and let me drift off into unconsciousness. I did end up falling asleep that night, but for less than 2 hours. It was a struggle just to climb out of the bed that morning and get ready to go meet with Ethan. But the morning light shining through my windows helped give me the last bit of motivation I needed. One thing that always puzzled me about Karl was why he enjoyed the night so much. His late night walks were a far cry from what I would have done. He always seemed so excited to do it. I never understood why. The location Ethan had given me to meet him at was surprisingly a library of all places. Call me naive, but it seemed a little too normal for someone like him and his so far cryptic tendencies. Speaking of which, it was a pain to find him in there. I scanned up and down the interior several times with no luck. In my mind, he should have stood out. Guess not. Where the hell are you? I whispered out loud to myself, darting my head around like a crazed pigeon. I was caught off guard when my phone began vibrating from me receiving 2 text messages. I retrieved it out of my pocket and took a glance to find both of them were from Ethan. Behind you. The first one read, "You need glasses or something?" I did a 180. There, Ethan sat between 2 of the non-fiction bookshelves, with his face buried in a novel about the history of supernatural sightings and folklore. I casually went up to him, putting up a front of false courtesy. "You're Ethan Velder?" I asked. "It's good to finally see you up close." "Sure," came his dry response. "Sit down. Got something to tell you." I hesitantly sat in the beanbag directly parallel, a look of eager anticipation all over me. "What is it? I've been waiting all night for this," I interrogated. "These Nocturnals, they're nothing like I've ever encountered. It's been a pain in my behind to learn anything about them. I've only been able to gather less than half a page's worth of info." The rasp of his voice boomed across the library from a man speaking so quietly. "Aren't they just like ghosts?" Ethan snickered, the closest sound to a full-on laugh I've ever heard him produce. "No, not even close. I even tried getting ectoplasm from them. Nothing. The typical baits, traps and everything are useless. They don't bite." In Karl's document, he said something about them needing to be in some sort of darkness. Well, that's true, but one of the few things I did find out is that when they have their sights set on someone, the darkness becomes less and less of a prerequisite for them. And right now, they've got their eye on you. I gripped the arms of my chair as he said it. I couldn't help but feel as if all the fluids in my body ceased flowing. I saw one of them at work yesterday. I could tell by how shook up on the phone you sounded. "How do we kill them?" "Kill them?" Ethan scoffed. "You don't. You can't. We just need to find a way to..." "Wait a minute." He paused, standing up from his chair and beginning to scan the area of the room behind me with a moderately paranoid expression. What are you looking for?" The light in the back left. It's flickering. He huffed while reaching into his jacket for something. It wasn't until now I noticed a sizable imprint in his jacket. I stood up and placed myself in front of him, attempting to diffuse his angst and not draw attention in our direction. "Would you chill out?" I whispered. "People are gonna think you're nuts." "No, they aren't. Have a look yourself." I hesitantly turned my head. The library was just the same as it had been minutes prior, but every single person was frozen, with the exception of Ethan and I. It was like they all had been stopped in time. None of them even blinked. They were complete statues. "Don't move," Ethan demanded, reaching into his jacket and pulling out an almost alien-looking weapon. I had rationalized it as being just a heavily modified shotgun with red rings around the barrel and some sort of cylinder containing a strange purple liquid hanging from the bottom. The light in the back Ethan had talked about flickering was beginning to spread to the rest of them. They all hummed and buzzed violently as they flashed in and out simultaneously. Now, the whole interior was starting to become an epileptic person's worst nightmare. The flickering of the lights made me come to a horrifying realization. I could feel my stomach churning. "Are they here?" I asked as I dotted my eyes frantically around the room, holding out hope the now frozen people would start moving once again. "What do you think?" Ethan replied rhetorically without even looking back. "Just try not to crap yourself. Last thing you want to do is let them know you're scared." "Yeah, because I'm sure they don't know that already," I clapped back. "Aren't you supposed to be the professional here?" The lights now all flickered at the same time. The bookshelves began to shake as the floor now rattled. Books fell off the shelves and the chairs were tipped over. I could feel the air become icy cold as the eerie hum of the ceiling lights only became louder. "You need to get out of here," Ethan demanded, putting a hand on my shoulder and trying to force me out of my spot. "How? We're trapped. My best chance is here with you," I said. "I said go," Ethan snarled. The lights flickering came to a climax when it became too intense and they exploded. Shards of glass and plastic fell to the carpeted floor, while the darkness flooded the room as a result. The light coming from the windows was covered with a sheet of powerful darkness. The opposite half of the room was completely drenched in a pitch-black abyss. Even Ethan seemed not to know what was going on. I was terrified. I could feel my hands shaking intensely. In the dark half of the room, 8 different pairs of red glowing dots stared fixed on us. I couldn't take my eyes off of them, not even for a second. They didn't move, make a sound, or speak. They simply continued to glare hungrily at us. I looked down at the floor and nearly screamed as I saw the darkness itself moving. It freaking moved, slithering across the floor as if it were given a body. I attempted to speak and scream, but no noise came out. My throat was closed up from the undeniable panic I was feeling. I thought I was gonna die there and then. "Stay back," Ethan commanded as the darkness continued moving its way toward him while he tried to fire his weapon, only for nothing to happen. He tried a couple more times to be faced with the same result. I had felt stupid for relying on him in the first place up to this point. What the hell?" he cursed. Haunting laughter came from the darkness. It was a combination of multiple bone-chilling cackles. They were sinisterly taunting. Some laughs being children, some being men, and some were women. The red dots slowly hovered forward through the dark, getting increasingly closer to Ethan and I as the pitch-black, almost liquid-like darkness swallowed up the rest of the room. It was closing in on the both of us. All we could do was watch and listen. Ethan attempted to fire the weapon one last time, and just like the previous efforts, nothing ended up happening. The only difference was that I was seeing a look of panic beginning to spread across his face. It only made my blood freeze even colder. Everything I knew about him so far told me that he wouldn't be afraid of anything. "I thought you could handle this," I shoved him, anger now coinciding with my terror. The void of darkness was now beginning to touch my feet. The volume of the horrific laughter increased as the glowing red eyes were now less than 10 feet away. It felt like this would be the end. I wanted to simply drop to my knees and give up as a horrible death slowly advanced towards us. I felt helpless in a way I couldn't put into words. Ethan was the first to go. The darkness pulled around his feet. He looked at me with nothing but despair and desperation in his eyes as he was suddenly snatched right in front of me. He didn't have time to scream, not at first at least. Once he had been consumed and pulled out of sight by the darkness. His screams were ear-shattering. I couldn't hear any sounds of him being maimed or harmed, but it was hard to distinguish the shrieks as being a result of paralyzing terror or pure agony. I chose the former. 2 pairs of the red eyes now stepped in place of where he once stood. His blood-curdling screams were suddenly and violently cut off after continuing for over 20 seconds. All I could think about was the potential horrific things they had done to him, along with the fact that I would very soon be next. The darkness had now reached me. It began to surround me, consume me, and I was left with nowhere to go. I was sure that this would be my daunting demise, in getting taken by these red-eyed shadow beings, the same as my cousin once had. I was fully surrounded by the darkness, and I felt something grab me. It was hard to describe, but whatever snatched me up felt like it was all around me, everywhere at once. The grip of it was cold, similar to that of stepping outside nude during a blizzard. I began to scream as I could feel the chilling sensation run its way through the inside of my body. Nothing but skin-numbing cold was all I could sense. I continued my shrieks as it kept spreading. The process was slow, agonizing in a manner no torture could ever compare to. I was miraculously lucky I was even able to open my eyes for a split second. All around me, I saw the Nocturnals. Their figures were still pitch black and details completely obscured, but their eyes were now white instead of red, and it hurt me to look at them. I covered my eyes as I continued bellowing my lungs out of my chest. Assimilation. The voices of the Nocturnals chanted as they all surrounded me, over and over again, as the feeling of that same overwhelming chill spreading through my veins finally came to a merciful end. It was only seconds after when I passed out. When I awoke, I took a deep breath. I was in my room. The lights were off, and everything was eerily silent. Morning light was leaking through my curtains, but they were shut. The main thing racing through my mind was how I even woke up in the first place, and how long I was out. Why was I even still alive? I should have been freaking out much more than I was. That's what I thought anyway. I exited my bedroom and marched down to my bathroom. The light was already on, which irritated the morning grog in my eyes. I quickly switched the light off, only letting a small amount of it seep in through the window. I looked in the mirror to see that I was completely unscathed, save for my crimson bloodshot eyes and a few bruises on my forearms. I had wondered if the same had happened to Ethan. I pulled out my phone and attempted to call him, only for it to go to voicemail several times. That was when I was going to try to call the police and file a missing persons report, right before noticing the time and immediately spiraling into a shallow pool of stress. It was only minuscule compared to what I felt when this situation usually occurred. Crap, I said. Gotta go to work. When I spoke, my voice was enhanced, amplified, whatever you would call it. I said a couple more words and phrases just to make sure what I was hearing was real. Every little noise or verbal outbursts I created had echoed throughout the walls of my house. I did everything in my power to chalk it up to my mind and senses being distorted from what had taken place. It was still fresh in my mind. Yet, Even though I couldn't stop replaying it in my head, I didn't feel as strongly as I should have. As mentioned before, I grabbed my shoes and got in my car before hesitantly driving to work. Stepping outside was harsh. It didn't burn exactly, but it caused me moderate internal irritation. I felt out of place from the moment I woke up. Seeing Sherry at work that day didn't change a thing. I didn't care much for her presence. Every word that came out of her mouth went over my head. I paid her next to no attention. That is, until she uttered the words, "Ryan, why are your eyes so red?" In my mind, I thought her question was trivial and maddening. I turned and simply looked at her without saying a single word. I just stared into her eyes as I reached over one of the shelves. "Hello?" she persisted. "Ryan, are you okay?" Once again, I ignored her. I went about the rest of my shift, half-assing nearly everything I did. I couldn't wait to get home, turn off the lights and relax. The store wasn't even busy by an average day's standards. Nonetheless, I was beyond exhausted. Arriving home that evening, strange feelings and emotions rose inside of me as nighttime approached. The light was seriously starting to hurt my eyes. I really needed to dim it. I'm going to finish writing this now. The light from the screen of my laptop is slowly becoming a burning sensation, and I can't take it anymore. I don't want to look at this screen for a second longer. But tonight, I'm gonna go pay Sherry a visit. These voices, they've been encouraging me to do so. One of them even sounded like Karl. Just like him, but distorted, like me. I kinda like it that way now. It's soothing. The dark isn't so bad, you know. Maybe everyone should take the time to shut their lamps off and find the peace that doesn't exist with the light.